Alright, so for the first time, I'm actually going to have to disavow a couple previous videos of mine. These were the videos where I said, like, oh, the British Empire did nothing wrong, and the idea of the Eternal Anglo is just a bullshit, divisive myth. Look, okay, I've been reading a lot more lately about early to mid 20th century history. I've been reading the book Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War by Pat Buchanan, a very amazing book. I've also read The Rising Tide of Color, which goes into detail a lot about the imperial conflicts in the early 20th century. And from reading about all this, I've come to realize yes, there is actually some truth to the whole Eternal Anglo theory. I mean, there is some truth to the idea that a lot of the problems we're facing in the world today are the end result of to some extent, the British imperial philosophy, the idea of the white man's burden, the idea of we have to make the world safe for democracy by putting down any threats to it, things like that. Um, my issue is, I think part of the reason why I countersignaled the whole Eternal Anglo idea is that a lot of the people who promote it are these feminist pagan Nordicists who quite frankly, what they want is much worse than what the Eternal Anglo wants because they want this like anarcho-primitivist society. But like, I mean, there is some truth to it. Like, the fact is, England has always opposed a united Europe. They opposed it by fighting Napoleon. They opposed it during the World Wars, and you could argue that maybe they were right to oppose it in some of these cases. But the fact is, they do tend to have this inherent philosophy of opposing a united Europe and opposing any strong continental European power. And I think a lot of the neocon rhetoric that we see today is largely derived from the Anglo American rhetoric of the early to mid 20th century. Um, in many ways, I would argue America has become the heir of Britain in terms of this kind of rhetoric. But either way, like, look, I don't pretend to be an expert in these issues. I still need to read a lot more. But the fact is, I know enough to know that maybe, yeah, I was wrong to counter signal this meme so hard. Now, I mean, I think what we need today is ultimately white unity, pan Europeanism. And I think people on both sides are getting in the way of that. You know, you have German chauvinism and you still have Anglo chauvinism today. And I mean, honestly, I see people on the alt right on both sides, like some who are far too chauvinistic toward Germany. Uh, and some who are far too chauvinistic toward the Anglosphere. But the thing is, the reason why the Eternal Anglo theory has validity is, like it or not, the Anglos are the dominant group of whites in the world today. Um, they are the dominant language, the dominant culture, and to an extent, being the dominant power means you have to take accountability for the world that you are ruling over. And I think that's part of the reason is like a lot of cultural Marxist values are essentially a warped form of Anglo values. This valuing democracy, individualism, freedom, liberty. It's become all about the liberty to be a transsexual and about punishing anyone who opposes that liberty. Not only the liberty to be a transsexual, but to be a proud transsexual and to get whatever you want. So this individualism, freedom has turned into Tumblr and special snowflaking. I mean, does this mean that the Anglos are wholly responsible for all these things? No, absolutely not. The French in the French Revolution were greatly responsible for a lot of the cultural roots of Marxism, as was, you know, Germans too. I mean, Engels was a German. You know, he co-wrote the Communist Manifesto along with Marx. Marx was a Jew, but Engels was a German. And, you know, Russia played a big part with the Soviet Union in advancing international leftism as well. But my point is, like, when I see there is a certain subgroup of the alt-right who are basically Anglo chauvinists. I encounter them. I argue with them a lot on Facebook, and on other places. And like when you really get talking to these Anglo chauvinists, you can kind of see where the Eternal Anglo meme comes from, because a lot of these people are very dead set in their belief that, you know, Anglo culture is morally superior, that British never committed any kind of awful genocide. Oh, what are those concentration camps with Boers over there? Oh, forget about that. Don't pay any attention to those. Let's talk about those German concentration camps. Let's not talk about those Boer concentration camps or those starved Irishmen. Let's just sweep that under the rug. You know, that's the thing. Is like they there's obviously chauvinists of every European country or language group, but I find Anglo chauvinists are the most obsessed with the idea of being morally superior, and that's why a lot of people really get angry about that, because it's like, hey, the Germans, for all their faults, they don't really see themselves as morally superior. They just see themselves like, oh, we're racially superior, we're smart, or whatever. And that can be very humiliating and condescending in its own way, but so can the idea of moral superiority. Um, so basically, yeah, and I mean, like, anyone who's not, like, I'm not a really a German chauvinist either. And those people, you know, they also annoy me, like the people who say Hitler did nothing wrong, and that like most German chauvinists tend to be Third Reich chauvinists. There, it would actually be interesting if there were any people who are like chauvinistic toward the Kaiser's Germany who still exist on the alt right, but I find those kinds of people, if they exist at all, are not very numerous. Like German chauvinism today tends to be Third Reich chauvinism, and I don't subscribe to that. Um, British chauvinism, on the other hand, it's like it's all pro Churchill, it's pro like Anglosphere, pro America, pro Britain, pro kind of, yeah, it's kind of a neocon bent. It's kind of like, you know, Britain and the Anglosphere rightfully should dominate over continental Europe. They're more moral, they're more they have better laws, they're more democratic, whatever, you know. Like it's all these, I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't think having a unipolar world has been good for us. I think we would be better if Russia was stronger. I don't think having, because since the end of the Cold War, we've had more of a unipolar Anglo-dominated world than ever before, and I don't think it's a good thing for us. I think culture Marxism has accelerated under these conditions because it's been essentially an uncontested rule of global capitalism. And global capitalism is largely an Anglo ideology. I mean, I'm not saying you can't be proud of your Anglo heritage. There's a lot of things to be proud of, like the fact that, you know, Anglos colonized North America, Australia, and New Zealand, and that they maintained these first world white societies, you know, in contrast to, you know, certain other people who colonized certain other regions. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, there's a lot to be proud of. Be proud of the works of Shakespeare. Be proud of you know, the contribution to the Western literary canon. There's a lot to be proud of, and you know, there's like when the Americans fought off the Barbary pirates. Like there's plenty of things to be proud of, but this uncontested Anglo-American chauvinism, it's basically a variant of neoconservatism as far as I'm concerned, and I don't think it's helpful for our movement. There's a lot of people of German descent, particularly, who are never going to accept this worldview. Like I am mostly of German descent, and I can tell you right now, I'm never going to accept a worldview that says Germany is evil, like inherently evil, and that, you know, everything, you know, the world wars were entirely Germany's fault. Even World War One was entirely Germany's fault. Britain never did anything wrong. You know, the Anglosphere as a whole never did anything wrong. Like these people, this chauvinism, it's a problem, okay? And yeah, so you know, I definitely was wrong to counter signal the memes so hard. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.